Bjarni Einarsson from Iceland is running the Mailpile project, and this is kind of a great conclusion for today, since there is the role of the collaboration to the mail server, and now we are ending up with the mail client. And Bjarni, let's go. Stage is yours.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everybody. This is a very brief introduction to who I am. I'm a free software developer, primarily, and I've been coming to FSCon since 2010 when I was invited. That was very fun. People have been talking about email all day, and I had the feeling before I started on this project that a lot of people in the tech community considered email to be a solved problem. It was boring, it wasn't interesting, development and energy was going somewhere else. I really disagree with that. I don't think email is a solved problem at all. And in fact, I would say that it's been getting worse in the past few years. And most of what I'm talking about there is because as a free software person, I care about independence, and I care about decentralization. And email is becoming really centralized. If you look at what the general public is doing, you look at what we're doing in this room, I'll bet a bunch of people here use Gmail. I use Gmail. I'm stuck on Gmail still. Because it's good. Gmail is really, really good. And its competitors, Yahoo and Microsoft, they're doing a good job as well. They provide a good service to people for a very affordable price. It's free. All you have to do is give them all your data. That's a problem. That's a problem that the free software community should be trying to fix, because it doesn't matter if Google is running all of these servers on Linux. That doesn't help the user in any way. It doesn't give the user any more freedom. So we're not serving our users. We're free software people, and we're telling them to use cloud-based services where we're doing a disservice. I still think there's a lot of work that could be done to improve spam filtering. And I don't know, people sort of forgotten or don't really realize this, but the trend towards having your email filtered in the cloud by some spam filter, it's basically opt-in censorship. You're saying, hey, censor my email, I trust you. It's fine. I think that's strange. Spam filtering should happen on the client, should happen close to you. And so I don't feel there's been enough innovation on these things. And the final sticker there is, of course, we're not encrypting our email. We've had PGP for what, 20 years? I don't know how long, but we've had it for a really long time. And very few of us are using it on a day-to-day basis. Even very few of us in this room who are very technically adept. The general public doesn't even know what it is. So, a little bit on this. Cloudy email is scary because Edward Snowden says so. And that's a part of it. But not all of us are afraid of the government. Some of us think the government is our friend. But we still need to worry about the other things. We still need to worry about how proprietary it is. There's a lot of lock-in, there's a lot of natural monopolies. Once you've been using email in the cloud, been using your gmail.com address to communicate with friends and family and business associates for years, switching to another address is not easy. There's a lot of lock-in there, and it happens very quickly. There's a risk of what Microsoft used to do, embrace, extend, extinguish. How many people here are familiar with that idea? Oh, not nearly enough. So the idea of embrace and extend is like what they tried to do with Internet Explorer. You give people a free piece of software that complies with open standards, does things in an open, compatible way, and then you add this little extra thing over there in the corner that's kind of neat and is optional, called ActiveX. And then you tell all the developers that when they want to make nice apps, they should use this ActiveX thing. And all of a sudden you have all these websites that don't work with any other browser. And so they try and take over and kill the open web this way. Now they failed. But if we allow email to live in the cloud, we run the risk of the same thing happening to email. We've already seen Gmail starting to move in this direction, Google starting to move in this direction, even if they're the good guys. There's starting to appear features in Gmail where if you're a Gmail partner and you send an email that's formatted in a specific way, little buttons show up in the user interface. So you can send people an email with a button in it, so you can click on that button and book a concert or participate in a survey. So they're extending email, and they're extending it in such a way that you won't get the full experience from those emails unless you're on Google's infrastructure. This is scary to me. I already talked about the spam filters being censorship tools. And email in the cloud is incompatible with end-to-end encryption. Having your email stored in one place, giving them the keys, giving them the passwords, you may as well not encrypt it at all. And all these free services, free as in cost, their business models rely on advertising. And in order to do advertising well, you need to be able to read the content of the email, understand what it's about, and target the advertising in a relevant way. So they don't want you to encrypt your email. If you do that, you break their business model. So they're never going to be able to provide encryption in the cloud. So we need to take email out of the cloud if we want encryption at all. Sort of general strategy, we should make decentralization easy. We should make it easy for people to run their own stuff. We should make it easy for people to migrate from cloud-based solutions to their own infrastructure, their own hardware, their own clients. We should be writing good software that people want to use. It should be pretty. It should be usable. It should be easy to work with. And we should write software that we enjoy hacking on. Because a lot of free software development is volunteer-based. And not all of us are getting paid. If it's not fun, if the software is ugly, we're not going to have an active community, we're not going to have volunteers. So that's an important principle right there. We need to make encryption make sense to people. Encryption is really confusing. We can't expect every single person in the world to understand the difference between a public and a private key and how RSA exponents work. And no, that's not going to work. And we need to find business models for email, for people providing email-based services that do not rely on ads and data mining. Because while the business models rely on ads and data mining, we're going to be stuck with spying. So I'm trying to walk the talk. I've started this project called Mailpile, where I'm trying to follow these general principles. It's free software. It's a personal webmail solution. So it's a webmail solution that you run on your own hardware. And ideally, you'd run it on your laptop or on a Raspberry Pi at home, something like that. It's built around the idea of searching and tagging. It's not built with IMAP as a core concept, although I want to be able to pull data in that way. One of our main goals is to put a user-friendly interface on OpenPGP encryption and decryption and signatures and that stuff. We're using accessible technology. We're using Python, HTML, and JavaScript, and these are some of the most popular languages out there today. So that gives us access to the widest possible pool of developers and supporters. And it gives you an API to your email. So you can actually start writing little things that interact with the search engine or your email using a REST API, which is something that modern developers like to do, or Python code. A little bit of background. Some of you may have seen me give a lightning talk about Mailpile. I think it was last year. That was at AFISCons. And it was a big text file which I scrolled through. I wrote it in 10 minutes. I performed this experiment. I had this idea, how would you build a fast search engine? And I had an idea and I realized that, well, email is not very big anymore. It used to be big, but now all of the email I've ever received fits on my phone. If I put in a 8 gig memory card in my phone, that'll take all my email. I don't have that much in volume. I have a lot of numbers, but the volume is small. And that means that I can actually fit a lot of information about my email in RAM. I have 2 gigs of RAM in my laptop. Most of you probably have more because my laptop's old. And if all of my email, all of the metadata for all of my email takes maybe 100 megs, that's not a lot. That's not a big price to pay for something that I use a lot. So I can actually put lots and lots of information in RAM, and the rest of it I can put on disk using a simple structure that lets me answer any question, any search query by opening a single file. That's how I got started doing Mailpile, because I built this and it's like, hey, this actually works. This is cool. And that's also why I'm not building on something else, because this did start as an experiment. It has the same concept of tagging or labeling as Gmail does, so you can assign tags to messages, and that basically becomes a custom search term that you can search for. And you can use that to emulate things. You can put a tag on a message as it arrives that says, this is a new message, which means it hasn't been unread yet. Or this is a new message, it should also be in the inbox. The user could say, this is an important message, I'll put a star on it. All of these user interface features that you see in a normal email application can be emulated using a tagging model. So that's what Mailpile does. And then you add the concept of filters, which is applying tags based on search terms. So when an email arrives, if it matches the term FSCons, I would automatically tag it with that tag. It allows me to organize my email automatically. People who have used Gmail will be familiar with this. If you've ever set up a Gmail filter, this is exactly how it operates. We need to have contacts and groups. This is getting a little bit hand-wavy. These are things we haven't implemented yet, but we're working on. We want to be able to maybe have different settings based on who we're communicating with, that sort of thing. But we definitely do need to have a good contact list. And the most important thing about contacts, if we want to enable encryption, is that your address book and your PGP keyring, they need to be tightly integrated. Ideally, they need to be the same thing. So when you're looking at your list of contacts and you're choosing which email address to send to, it should tell you right away whether you're going to be communicating securely or not. That shouldn't be some sort of separate mental process. It should be something you see. The moment Mailpile stores all the mail on disk, or it assumes the mail is on disk, it assumes you've been using Thunderbird or Mutt or Mail.app on the Mac. You just tell it where your mail is and it'll go and it'll read it. So you don't have to import your mail or download it again or anything, it'll just read it in place. It puts all the data in a folder named .mailpile, the home directory, and we're moving towards trying to encrypt all the data that Mailpile itself creates. So the search index should be encrypted, the settings should be encrypted, so this stuff is kept secure by default from the very start. There was some discussion at the last talk about how to encrypt a search index. And we're doing it this way right now, so you can one-way hash the terms. That's not good enough, we need to fix that, but that's better than nothing. Some ideas on how to make OpenPGP easy to work with. The most important one is to just aim to do so from the very beginning. I don't think any email client project has actually done that. Just said, hey, encryption is so important, we're going to put it in the UI as a first-class citizen. And that's what we're trying to do. So you can give cues to the user in the UI to help them understand the security attributes of their communications. So they should see a visual difference when they receive an encrypted message from a clear text one. And they should be warned that, like say I receive an encrypted email and I decide to forward it to someone else, and I'm forwarding content that I received encrypted to someone who doesn't have a key, that breaks the flow of security. That means that I'm leaking data that was originally sent to me in a secure fashion. The user interface should warn the user that this is happening. It shouldn't stop them, but it should make sure that the user understands that they're making a security mistake. Things like that. And we have some ideas about how to fix the problem which was mentioned earlier, that PGP doesn't encrypt the headers by default. So it doesn't encrypt the subject line. And if you look at what the NSA have been gathering up and what they're interested in the metadata. They're interested in the stuff in the headers. Encrypting the body doesn't really bother them that much. So we need to fix how the encryption is actually done. And that's going to be interesting. We're going to have to, if we do this and we get some traction, we're going to have to get other developers of email programs to change how they do this as well. And it turns out that there's actually space within the MIME spec and the PGP MIME spec for fixing this. But nobody's doing it. So we have some ideas there that we want to explore. But the main idea is to try and be as secure as possible by default, and do things for the user so he doesn't have to understand it. We should implement the best practices as default behavior, not as something the user has to understand and do himself. So, just skip this slide. And here's a bit, that we're going to have to do. We're going to have to integrate with the operating system, detect what the user has already, train the spam filter. We have to make an installer for Windows and the Mac so the general public can actually use this. that's a goal. This isn't software for us. It's software for everybody. And work on it. Again, this is the most common frequently asked question. Why are you not using Not Much? Why are you not using Lucene? Why are you not using this other thing which has already been developed and already exists? And the selfish answer is that this started as a personal project. Writing a search engine was fun. But it turns out that has benefits. It means that we have very few dependencies. You can pull Mailpile off of GitHub now. You'll have to install maybe one supporting library and it'll run. And I think on a lot of Linux machines, you can just git pull and it'll run because the dependencies are already there. On the Mac, we have to install LXML, which is a little bit annoying. But you know, it's not a big deal, and we're thinking about getting rid of that dependency. And Python is a nice and accessible programming language. By writing the search engine in Python, it means that we can rapidly iterate on making sure that the search engine is actually giving us the data that we need to give the user a good experience and a good user interface. For me, understanding my roughly 1,000 lines of Python code to implement the search engine, it's very easy for me to fix that. It would have been very difficult for me to go and understand how Lucene and Not Much work. So I didn't do it. The other question we get from people every once in a while is why a webmail? Why not a native app? Something that, you know, looks like Thunderbird, Outlook, or even. And this has a few benefits. Some of them are to do with the development. We can get a lot of talent and a lot of experience from the web design community. That's gotten, I mean, UI development has probably gotten more energy and more focus in the web than than all the rest of computing put together by now. People are spending so much time making websites pretty and usable and easy to understand that if we can be there, we'll have access to much more talent. And making email part of the web is kind of neat. I mean, I do like the idea that if I have my Mailpile, it can either be at home or on my laptop. But if I have Raspberry Pi, I can leave it at home. If I have a way to access that server, I can interact with it over the web. And I could have public permanent URLs to each message, and I could share them with people if I have access controls to let me do that. And have RSS feed to your email. That'd be cool. So I'm going to give a demo. Just to clarify, this is pre-alpha software. Don't expect it to actually work, but some things do work. And I'm going to show you what we've got so far. So this is the command line. And I was told this was a technical track and people like that sort of thing, so we type help, help. Get a list of all the variables. No, wait, that's broken. Damn. We get a list of URLs that it comes with. These are actually, it'll auto-generate this from the code. So you can see we have the beginnings of a REST API where you can hit different endpoints and request information about your email index and your messages. I can perform search. That took, I think, 10 seconds. And that's stuff I've got to do with this class. I could type inbox, and that's doing the same thing as if I search for that same list. I can filter things I don't want to. This is my actual email, and I'm starting to use it. We're starting to dog food. For the hackers in the room, this is kind of fun. Who wants to guess what this does?
Can't see it.
Ah, I can't see it. Oh, okay. So I've typed hacks/pi CLI. And now I have a Python REPL where I can interact with Mailpile programmatically. I didn't realize you guys wouldn't be able to see this. Let's see. Try to shrink my window.
Maybe just make the window smaller.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to do.
Further up. Bottom line should be further up. I think that's the.
No, this isn't. This is awesome. It's awesome.
Right.
There we go.
Right click and move it up.
Yeah, but I also had to change
Yeah,
tiling mode.
yeah.
It didn't want to let me down. Did you read that?
Yeah.
Alright, so thing as we had before. But I can also do as JSON. And if I wanted to, let's see, we have a session. Those are the IDs of the messages that match the last search. So I can probably say email. Obviously, this would need to be documented for people, but there's a little bit of some potential here. Now I have an email object. I can say email. Sunshine, I'm telling you. So it's hackable. And you can import Mailpile as a Python library and write code that does this. That's how we do our black box testing. So I have, I think that was fun, it said something. The code. So like this is the test script that we put together to make sure that we don't regress too quickly. Say here I'm creating Mailpile object, telling it where it lives, grabbing the configuration so I can manipulate it, and I'm doing settings, scanning for new mail, save, load. So you can write Python code that will interact with your email in interesting ways. For the people that are more sort of front-endy or like the web, there's a web interface. Like this. So one of the things that makes Mailpile a slightly different project from a traditional free software project is we have a designer. We have a very talented graphic designer and user interface designer who's working with us on making this look nice and make sure that this makes sense to people. And as was mentioned earlier, we funded this via Indiegogo. So we're actually able to pay him a salary and pay me a salary. We're working on this full time. So this isn't a hobby project. Again, this is alpha. Not everything works. I think this one's pretty boring. I think this is supposed to be a list of tags and labels. It does seem that that one is working. We're waiting for people to give us all their money. I can show you the composition dialog. This changed last night. Write stuff. Choose who I send as. And we're just starting to work on contacts, so that's fake. But I implemented the API input yesterday for actually searching and populating this list with suggestions. So there's stuff happening. If I go back, oh yes, I have to show you one more thing because I did promise an API, didn't I?
Oh, search.
Oh, search. I forget about that. That's so boring. What should I search for?
Smart, the same we did before.
You see, that's a bit slower because that's the time it's taking the browser to actually think about things and render it. We haven't optimized that. But, it's giving me results. I can search for Smaudi minus Mailpile. Pretty sure Smaudi hasn't sent me anything sensitive lately. So it supports complex queries. This is one place actually where it would be nice to get some help. It would be nice if someone contributed a better query parser that will allow people to type natural looking search queries. This one's a bit ugly. So that works. Another fun demo. Let's see, what would be a good topic? So if I click here, now my computer's going to be a little slow for this one.
I think Brennan broke that.
Oh, you think you broke it?
Yeah.
Okay, well, see, it's relevant. Okay, I'm going to go back to the presentation for a bit, and then we'll have discussion. So to reiterate, we want to make it. We want to rescue email by making decentralization easy. So the goal of this project is that anyone should be able to download this software, much the way you would download Chromium or Thunderbird or Outlook. No, you don't download Outlook. Just any desktop software. We want to make it easy to install and walk people through setting it up. Preferably walk people through registering their own domain names and becoming independent online. But it's going to have to know how to go and pull their email from where it is today. Trying to make it pretty and usable. Trying to make it hackable as well. That's what I forgot to show you. Okay. And make the encryption understandable. That's work that we haven't really started on yet. We're doing the underpinnings, making sure that we integrate properly with GPG and that sort of thing. It's not bubbled up to the UI, so I can't show it to you. And we have ideas for business models. Here's our business plan 1.0. 3 people, me, Shmoda, and Brennan. We funded the first year of work using Indiegogo. We raised $163,000 and a bunch of Bitcoins. And that's enough that allows us to pay ourselves salary and live well for about, 14, 15 months. So we have time, and we promised in the campaign that we would ship a 1.0 release next summer. So there will be software that people can use at that point. What we're hoping to do when things are becoming a bit more real is to reach out to people that have backed us in the past and ask them if they want to back us again, or even back us on an ongoing basis as a subscription. See if we can build up a community of people that care about this being a reality and maybe even want to have a say. So we're going to try having a Mailpile community, which you pay to be a member of, and that gives you a vote, so you get to have an influence on which direction the project moves in. And this is one of the perks that we promised people in the Indiegogo campaign. They get to have a say. And the first question we're going to be asking them will be, which free software license should we be using? Currently, the code that's out there is being dual licensed under the AGPL 3 and Apache 2. And as most of you know, those are very different licenses. One of them is very business friendly, and one of them is very, very strict about protecting user freedom. We want to ask the community which license they feel their money should go towards supporting. How should the result of their input be licensed? That's going to be an interesting experiment. We'll see how that goes. And that's my talk and my demo. I'm going to go back and show you what I forgot to show you. So, pretty much anything that you can request is available as JSON. So this is, I showed you this in the command line before, but it makes it very sort of easy to discover and explore. And the idea is that some people, they're developing JavaScript at the front end. This means that whenever they're on a page, they can just open up and just as JSON, and they can see what data they're working with. And it also means that once there's access controls and you have a way of giving credentials, you may be able to create external tools that actually communicate with your Mailpile. And of course, that's not super exciting if your Mailpile is just localhost or locked away in a server somewhere that no one has access to. But we would really like to explore ways to make it easy for people to run publicly visible servers as well. And that's what I was working on before I started Mailpile. I was working on a project called PageKite. And PageKite is a sort of dynamic proxy solution that lets you run a publicly visible web server on a device that does not have a public IP. So we're actually very interested in putting together a package where you can install this on a little home computer, put it somewhere you consider secure, give it your encryption key so that it can encrypt email, decrypt incoming email so you can search it. But you can still access it over the web from wherever you are. And you could have an Android app that will communicate with your personal Mailpile using this API, REST API, and give you access to your email while you're on the go, even though your email is living secure, locked inside your home. That's one of the visions for where this goes and why it's interesting to do this as a web device or a web application. I think with that, I'm going to open up for questions.
did you consider concrete ways to protect it when you're publishing it on, making it accessible from the web? I'm thinking things like Web ID, which is my favorite.
We haven't started working on that yet. I'm aware of Web ID, I think it's quite cool. I'm not sure it applies when you're logging into your own data. It seems like it's more a way of communicating with other sites. But I need to research it more and
Maybe we
understand
could
it better.
talk more about that, because I think it's excellent, perfect for exactly this kind of thing.
That's the one which, well, honestly, it might make more sense to just generate a cert and just use the built-in SSL certificate mechanisms directly. I'm not sure we need the extra complications Web ID does.
That is part of what Web ID is.
I know, I'm just not sure we need the rest. Yeah.
Yeah, you showed this compose / reply window like quickly. I'm just wondering what you thought about the HTML editor, like a tool for working if it's only like a text area so far.
Yeah, we haven't started working on that. I know that people have been asked for it, so inevitably we will end up having some sort of a rich text editing ability, but we're kind of postponing it because we want to be sure we understand everything else, and until we understand how we're going to do user interface feedback on sort of the security side of things, we don't want to start complicating the email composition dialogue with other things. So that's an open question. Yes?
Communicating between Python and GPG, do you have any idea which library or whatever we're going to use?
Schmoed has been working on our own. Basically, we're just going to talk to the GPG binary itself. So when we bundle this up for people, we'll just ship gpg.exe or whatever with it.
But you're making your own. I'm not sure if there are any.
Well, there's none that were nice for Python. And because we want to interact at a relatively low level with it, we basically just want to make GPG calls and get answers back. That's not a lot of code.
Has a project, which is the Tor project has a GP communication which acts by calling the binary.
Do you know if that works on Windows?
I have no idea, but it's aiming to be Python 3 compatible as well.
Have you looked at this module?
No, but I know that the problem we've been having with Windows thing is one that we can make go away. I just don't know Windows very well, so I don't know how.
It's not a lot of code, and we're shy about introducing new dependencies. So while we feel like we're not maintaining a lot of code, we're happy to be not invented here and get yelled at for that. But as soon as it starts to get bigger, that changes. So that's good to know about that project. There were questions in the back. I don't want to ignore you guys in the back. You were asking?
Yeah, I was thinking maybe one business idea could be to sell Raspberry Pis with everything pre-configured.
That would be fun. That also makes us hardware vendors.
Yeah, but
We don't know how to do that.
you could just sell the card.
Sorry?
Just just sell the card, and everyone can plug it in themselves.
It's possible.
We could become Freedom Box competitors.
Or we could just work with the Freedom Box.
Oh, you're right. You already subscribed. That's good.
Hey, Evan Moulton is one of our biggest backers. So you've been had your hands up for a while.
Yeah, it's okay. I was wondering, do you have a set road plan for the 1.0 release?
No, we don't plan that far ahead. We have a roadmap for the next 2 months.
Yeah.
Once we finish shipping the alpha, which is supposed to be shipped in January, we're going to take stock.
Right.
A lot of people have been coming to us and asking if they can help. We have to develop a multi-user version of this as well, which is actually quite different in some ways.
Yeah.
And once we have a basic alpha that you can use and play with, then we're going to sit down again and figure out how we spend the next few months after that.
All right, because you mentioned you had a set deadline for the 1.0
Yeah,
release.
we do, but we're sneaky.
Yes.
We have a set deadline for 1.0. We don't have a set definition of what 1.0 is.
All right.
Instead of trying to not care about any other interface than the web one, how hard would it be to get a different interface? Is there any layer which is suitable for logging in something else?
Well, I actually use this interface quite a bit. Just the text interface.
What I think about it for.
And so that's where the API comes in. Because the idea is that Mailpile is running in the background as a service. It's receiving your mail, it's indexing it, it's keeping everything up to date. Having an application that communicates with the REST API, that's not hard.
So there is one piece which handles the mail and another piece which talks to the like RPC server.
Yeah.
And then produces some JavaScript and
Yes.
Okay.
That should be totally possible.
Or just to throw it in there, if somebody really hated browsers and decided that they really wanted a GTK version, they could write a Python WX GTK app and just import Mailpile, and then just use it the way we're using it to develop the web version. There's nothing to prevent you doing that.
Okay, I understand.
But we'll probably never do that ourselves.
What I had in mind, the interface which is now designed with the web technology, if there is any representation which could be reused by corresponding implementation in different technology, but which would have the same look and feel.
Yeah, well, this is one of the reasons we're only doing the web interface first, because that's where we flesh out the concepts, figure out sort of the basic way people are going to interact with the app, and make sure the API will support that. And then once you have that in place, I want to go and do a Curtisan interface. I want to be able to SSH in and access this that way. But I want to do so using the same metaphors as the web interface has, so as much as an extent as makes sense. You had your hand.
Yeah, you were talking about encrypting metadata at a later point, and what I regard to be the big problem would be who sent and to whom and at what time. Because if a whistleblower mails a newspaper, your NSA or FRA or whatever are going to see she mailed the newspaper a week before they published this article. She's a whistleblower.
This is a hard problem, and I think the answer to that is probably Mixmaster, that stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not very familiar with that technology. Another thing that I'm very excited about exploring when I have time, which I don't know when will be, would be to integrate with Tor and do this as make Mailpile, your personal Mailpile, be a Tor hidden service. So you can access your mail over Tor, but also people would, if I put a very small, simple SMTP server into Mailpile, which is not a lot of code, you could have a Tor hidden service email address where people could email each other directly within the Tor network and never leave that. So it would go end to end from one Mailpile to another. And we don't need to invent any protocols or anything. That would just use normal SMTP over Tor.
I work at a newspaper, so it's a very real problem to me. I would be interested in hacking on that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You mentioned multi-user in future. What's your initial take on what kind of architecture you have?
No comment. Really, until the app is mature a little bit more, it doesn't make sense to answer that. One of the easiest ways to do it would be just to say when you log in, it will spawn a process for you that has your data. And there will be very little communication between individual Mailpile instances. I don't know if that's something that would be acceptable to the people that want to deploy this. They might need more integration. But keeping the search index separate for different users and thinking about privacy and all that stuff, it's kind of tricky. So I would be tempted to do something very simple like that to begin with.
It would be like an IRC client with an HTTP user interface.
Sounds like a
Like
weird.
I'm glad you're in the room. We can have some conversation.
So I was wondering what kind of dependencies you said you're keeping the dependencies small. Are you using Python standard libraries to send and receive email or?
At the moment, yes.
Yeah.
We may have to move away from that because they are a bit crap.
Yeah.
The alternative would be to move to Python 3. We're doing this on Python 2.7 right now. And I know that some of the libraries are better and some of them are being fixed. That makes it hard. Actually, The ironic thing is, if we do that, it won't cause any particular problems on the Mac, it won't cause any particular problems on Windows, but Linux users are going to have a hard time because they already have Python. They don't want to install this other Python that we depend on. So we'll just see how that develops. But for now, we're mostly using the built-in libraries. We depend on LXML for XML and HTML parsing and sanitation. That's the one that causes us a little bit of problems when installing, but basically nothing else. So you can just get full and you'll be up
Jinja.
and running in minutes.
Jinja.
Oh yeah, Jinja, that's right. Yeah, that's a new one, I forgot about that. But that's not hard to install.
Yeah. Just a clarification maybe. I was a little puzzled by your response to the thing about web ID. You are thinking of having access, web access to the Mailpile, but only personally, not sharing with others, not sharing partly, not multiple layered access to things.
Initially, only personally.
Okay.
But it would be very interesting to explore the other thing, but that's a whole can of worms. Because then we need to really be careful that people can't access stuff that they're not supposed to be able to access.
Sure.
I'd love to do that. I think that would be cool. I'm not going to say we do it in 1.0.
Oh, 1.1.
Yeah.
I guess the answer, so we can take this question as a feature request. A lot of from addresses, and especially recipient-specific from addresses. It's very practical for avoiding spam.
Well, we actually already have that. So the idea of having multiple personalities is just, I can't live without that. If we're ever going to be able to use Mailpile ourselves as developers, we're going to need to have multiple personalities.
It's not just a sort of similar interface like Thunderbird, and there I have hundreds of from addresses. I don't want to choose from a list.
Oh really? How?
So I want it to be found based on the recipient.
Yes, that is one of the things. It should suggest a personality based on who you're communicating with and how you communicated before. And that is the sort of thing that's relatively easy to do because we have a fast search engine. So that's something we hadn't thought about, but yeah, it's cool to know that you can.
So speaking of unauthorized access, I wonder who do you intend to market this to and when? Because I heard you talking about you want to interact with GPT on a low level, and I don't know what you mean by that. But
interact with who on the low level?
GPT. Or you said you wanted to interact with OpenPGP on a low level.
Yeah.
And so there are numerous examples of other projects that that use or combine cryptography primitives, and it's notoriously hard to do.
Not at low level.
Okay, but even pretty highly level stuff is really hard to do, and most people get it wrong. So that's one thing, and the other thing I'm wondering is since you choose to make a web-based email, you also have to consider like XSS and all those attack vectors.
Yeah, there's a lot of security problems that we have to deal with. Building an email application, you're basically working with data that other people are throwing at you all the time. Malicious people can inject stuff in there whenever they want. It's a hostile environment. And all I can say is that we're aware of that. We're going to do our best.
So who are you going to market it to and when?
Initially to the people that back the project. Those are the people, those are our customers right now, and we would like to try and make sure that they're relatively satisfied. But my personal goal is to make something that is usable by people that care about privacy. There's a lot of talk about privacy online and security. Most people are completely helpless. And if you tell your mom, I'm assuming your mom is not technical, or forgive me if she is technical, your close non-technical relative says, I'm really worried about privacy, I want to get off Gmail.
Said no one ever.
That's actually not true. But people are worried about these things, but they don't have any options. And if you sit down and you try and tell someone, well, install Thunderbird, and and then install Enigmail, and then learn about PGP keys. I mean, that's hard for us to do. For a non-technical person, that's just not an option at all. So I want to provide a software solution that's an answer to that question. So when the person says, I would like to be a little bit more secure and a little bit more private, then we can say, hey, try Mailpile. It'll look nice, it'll be easy to use, and it will try and do the right thing security-wise to its the best of its abilities. So that's our user base, I hope. Yeah.
It's just a small note about what you said about Python 3 and Linux. On some systems like Gentoo, we have slotted Python versions. So you can actually have both of them at the same time.
Yeah.
If this starts being a problem for other users, I wouldn't be surprised if they take a similar approach on other distros in the future.
Yeah. Well, we'll look at this. As we start hitting problems with the underlying libraries, this is one of the strategies we may take to resolve that. We haven't decided.
I may not have followed entirely, but the mail, is it stored at the same server that Mailpile is installed on? Or I was thinking, is it possible to use Mailpile as a front end to Gmail or something for these people who have already locked themselves in?
I am assuming that Mailpile will download your email and keep a copy locally.
Yes.
And that's what I'm assuming is the primary mode of operation, because if I don't do that, I can't make any promises about performance, and I can't make any promises about how secure the entire pile of mail is. If people decide to tick the box that says leave mail on server, not much I can do about that, but that's not what I would recommend. If somebody is in this camp that they're worried about their privacy and they want to improve it, then they should be downloading their email, keeping it locally, and they should have good backups. And that's the right solution to that problem. Yeah.
And I'll handle mail here as a storage
Yes.
and which somebody else modifies. Like instead of fetching the data, can receive the data into directly.
Yes.
Could you repeat that?
The question? Yeah.
Could
So you were asking if I could point Mailpile at a mailter that other
And then some
applications
other
are
agents
working with at the same time.
to populate it.
And that's exactly how we're using it right now. Mailpile doesn't currently know how to download email itself. I'm using FetchMail. Smauri was downloading his email using Thunderbird for last time I checked.
Yep.
And Brennan is using mail.app to download his email. And Mailpile is reading from all of those locations. And when it makes a mistake and gives me a duplicate message or something like that, that's a bug. It's supposed to happen.
Okay, let's give a big hand for the. Thank you, people. Thanks all the speakers for your efforts. It has been a really, really interesting day. Long day though. Now it's time to go somewhere, grab something to eat, and maybe a nice Swedish beer or two. And let's see tomorrow here. Thank you.
Good job, guys.
Oh, okay.